So, thank you. Our learning intention today, or what we're trying to aim for, is that we will try to identify what is an explanatory and a response variable when it comes to your bivariate data. So now we're looking at two variables here, yeah, explanatory variable and response variable. I would say the words themselves give away what they mean, okay, but at the same time, some kids still need to understand what is the difference between the both, okay? Another way you might see these words is EV and RV. Okay, explanatory EV, response RV. Or you might also see it as independent. Okay, so the EV is independent variable and the RV is dependent variable. Okay, you definitely see them in your textbooks as these words. So EV, RV. EV is independent variable, RV is the dependent variable, and you will definitely come across these often. So we're going to try and understand what is the difference between these two variables. What is an EV and what is an RV? Okay, I'm going to move on. Yeah, cool. All right, let's move on. So let's try and match some of these definitions really quickly, just so we can recap what we learned in bivariate and then how some of it might relate to in our univariate data. So class intervals. When we see the word intervals, okay, remember back to histograms. Intervals, eh? Where do we put that here? What would it fit with? Okay, what do we think? You're saying the third one? No? Okay, I would say it's the fourth one. Probably the fourth one.
That one.
Yeah, this one here. Good, okay. Positively skewed, what does that mean? So positively skewed, remember the median is at the start and then it goes down like that. Third one for positively skewed. Okay, yeah, you're saying that data scores decline in a positive direction. Okay, I'll go with that too. Negatively skewed, probably the last one. Decline in a negative direction. Lower quartile, second one.
Actually,
Have a think.
no, it's not. It's first one. First one.
Yep, so it occurs in the lowest half. Yeah, so this one here up here.
I didn't read it.
Yep, so you got to make sure you read it. And then 5-point summary here is that second one here.
Oh, that's messy.
Messy as, but it's okay. All right.
Why do you use two blacks?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So it's okay, but just understand that that's what we looked at last time. Okay. Now, remember that's slightly different to what we're going to look into. Okay, these things are going to be different to what we look at for bivariate data. So we won't actually be looking at this stuff anymore for bivariate. We're looking at different things now. So let's look at this. What kind of relationship does the line graph show? What kind of comments can you make about this data? So if you look at this data, it's a graph, it's an X and Y graph. I can see that this is my X axis and this is my Y axis. Okay, what can you guys see from this graph?
Cracks.
Cracks.
I don't know. I just didn't get the image.
It's positive, so which way is it going? Upward, so it looks like it's positive. That's a good one. I like that. So it's going in an upward direction, it's positive. I'll write that down. What else do we see? This title's good, so you've got these.
The X and Y axes are centered.
What, sorry?
No.
Yep, Jordan?
It's negatively skewed.
So you're saying it's negatively skewed. Okay, remember, when it comes to skewness, that was back with bivariate and univariate data. We look at it differently when it comes to bivariate data. So we're not looking at skew anymore.
What's the difference? Positive is down to up.
Yep, so positive is going up. Okay, but we don't use skew. We use another word for this. Okay, but I like what I think not Alana, the other student said. So that's good. So it's positive. It's going up. Okay, what can we see about the data? So as something increases, what happens to the other one as well?
The immunity disease also increases.
Yeah. So if you're increasing the breastfeeding, it looks like immunity always increases too.
So more breastfeeding makes more immunity.
Looks like breastfeeding is a problem.
No,
Well-
not a problem. It's better.
Yeah, breastfeeding is not a problem, but it does. What does it do? It's affecting something. What's it affecting? The immunity. Okay, so we can see here that the breastfeeding in some ways affects what happens to the immunity. The more you breastfeed, Okay, the greater the immunity. And it's going in a positive direction, as was mentioned. Okay. So would you suggest that this data, reading these statements, babies with more immunity to disease get breastfed more, or babies who get breastfed are more immune to disease?
Second one.
Second one, good. Why the second one?
Because that's just
Makes more sense.
right.
It makes more sense, yeah, because the reason why is breastfeeding is counted as an EV, okay, and immunity to disease is an RV. So
EV goes first.
EV, listening, EV affects or determines what happens to the RV. Okay, so understand that.
Smart man.
I get it.
Yeah,
He does.
good. So the EV affects what happens to the RV. So understand that. The EV is the explanatory variable, so it explains what happens to the response variable. Okay? So in data, when researchers or people who do stats find relationships between two variables, they'll often seek if they influence each other. So if the EV affects the RV. Okay? So remember, like I said, the EV explains or affects the RV. So the EV is the explanatory variable. So it affects or explains what happens to the response variable. It also, another word is it influences what happens to the RV.
Oh my goodness.
Sometimes you might not be able to find, okay, a correlation or anything that connects the two variables. Okay, so it does happen. But generally, that's what we try to do when it comes to data. Can we find a correlation, or is there something that relates to both? Does the EV explain the RV? Okay.
And so, what if it doesn't?
If it doesn't, then If it doesn't, then a graph might look something like this.
Yeah, I better say that, yeah.
Random
Scatter.
scatter plot that looks like this. No direction, no
What
nothing.
if it's a line graph, but the line goes like up and down, up and down, up and down?
Yep. So that might have a correlation or might not, but generally it won't. Okay. Let's continue. So these notes made an error. Breastfeeding should obviously be down here, and immunity should be here. Notice how when you look at the graph, the EV is always on the
Yeah, I
x-axis.
said that, yeah.
Always.
Always.
Always put EV on the x, and then the RV always goes on the y-axis. So EV on the x, RV on the y. Don't forget that. Okay. EV on the x, RV on the y. Okay, let's keep going. So let's have a look at these variables. Which is the EV and which is the RV? So they've mixed them up. We've got to think about which one affects the other. So
Oh, that's pretty
sleep or concentration, which one determines the other?
Concentration.
So you're saying concentration is the EV or is it the RV?
Up to you. I think I reckon it's
It
RV.
both.
I reckon it's RV.
You think it's the
Yeah,
RV?
it is.
Okay, so that's correct.
The more concentration.
Concentration is the RV, sorry. Sleep is the EV.
Yeah.
Alright, shh. Okay. You don't have to write notes for now, but just listening. The EV, so the sleep, your sleep will affect how much you can concentrate.
Yes.
Okay. What about germinating seeds or fertilizer? So this is saying seeds that are sprouting or fertilizer. What affects the other?
Fertilizer.
Fertilizer.
Good. So the fertilizer is the EV and the germinating seed should be the RV. The more fertilizer, the more seeds germinate. Price of veggies and weight of veggies.
Wait.
Weight is EV.
Good. So the weight affects the price. Very good. And body fat and wrist
I
circumference.
think body fat's EV.
Boy fat EV.
Yeah, you're saying body fat is EV.
Yeah.
Yeah, this can sometimes be interchangeable depending on what you're measuring, but I would say that's correct. EV.
Not.
If you concentrate,
Mister.
you get more sleep.
The more concentration, the more sleep you get. That doesn't make no sense.
No, it's the more sleep, the more concentration. And last one, education and income.
Education is EV.
EV, sir.
Generally, yeah, but also you think about some people in life who don't have a good education, they might have a high income. So
And
it is
The
debatable.
more you do,
high income can get a better education as well.
Exactly. It is debatable.
Smart in farm.
So, some things to think about, yeah? All right, so EV and RV, these are some notes in your textbook. When investigating them, okay, remember that the EV, okay, we expect that to predict the RV. So the EV, like I said, affects the RV. Affects or determines. I would write this down, guys, somewhere in your notes. EV affects or determines the RV. Okay, remember that. And like I said before, you might see EV as independent variable, and you might see RV as dependent variable. You'll see it on your notes every now and then. Okay, but just understand the difference between the two. An example there, we wish to investigate the question, do older people sleep less? The variables are age and time spent sleeping. So you've got two variables, age and time spent sleeping.
That could be like a time sleeping fixed
Age.
Okay, so what do we think? Which one is EV, which one is RV?
Mr. Can it be different? Can it be like this, like because actually no.
Yeah, so what do you guys think?
I reckon time spent is EV.
You reckon time is EV?
Yeah.
Okay. And
But I feel like it can also be edge.
Yeah, true, me too.
I feel like this is also interchangeable.
Yeah,
But if you're trying to measure how much people sleep, I think theoretically you'd probably go with age as the EV, because you'd look at the age groups and say, all right, how long do these age groups sleep?
Yeah.
Because that probably determines how much they spend sleeping.
Yeah.
Okay.
Babies can sleep like 15 hours and like
This one here, let's try this one. So you've got two variables, say kilojoule consumption and weight loss. So what's EV, what's RV?
EVs, yeah, that.
EV you think is? So this is about people trying to lose weight?
EVs,
It could be both.
Can be both, yeah. But if you're trying to measure,
No, because the more skinny you are, like, the less you eat and stuff.
but I mean, skinny people eat a lot too, right?
Yeah, but, you know, but just as a...
This is a tricky one.
I would say kilojoule consumption is EV. How much you eat can affect how much you lose in terms of weight.
Because if when you're like big and when you're big and you're trying to lose weight, you literally like you eat less than skinnier people.
True. But I mean, I think this is in general. You're not trying to bulk up or get big. It's just weight loss. Okay. All right. So that's basically it for 7A. I'm going to get you guys